Hello, I have actually never made a video on how I paint a featherweight, and I got one in yesterday, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is not going to be terribly in detail, but I want to give you a quick look through my process. So I do remove all of the paint and then, self-etching primer and work up from there. But what I wanted to do is tell you really quick the basics of that. So I actually already stripped the front plate and the light fixture, just so you can see. I do use a media blaster with glass bead. It's a pretty fine grit so that it's going to remove the paint entirely, but it's not going to damage the metal at all. Because this is a, ooh, I missed a little bit right there. I'll put it back in for that. But those two pieces I did because there's not a lot that you have to protect there. There is a ton that you have to protect on the machine itself. On like the motor housing, I have to protect the bearings. I have to protect up here, the little inlet. Any place that's threaded in the machine, nothing can touch the gears. There's a whole lot of threaded places and everything. So I'm just going to give you a quick walkthrough on how I protect and mask all of this up so that it's safe to go into my blasting cabinet. All right, so I'm just going to get started on the motor housing. I actually just did this one just before I turned on the camera. And there's two basic things that I use. I use a combination of tape and plug. And the tape that I use, it is this red poly tape. It says Sure Tape in there. But it's very, very sticky. But it's strong enough, it's not going to come off. It's very protective inside of that hostile environment in there. So that's the tape that I'm using. And so like on this, say just, for example, this piece, I need to protect this bearing here, at all costs. And I'm not really going to be spraying inside too much because there's not any paint in there. That's just, in case some residual stuff gets in there. So that's going to protect the inside of that bearing. But on the outside, there's a couple of things. I don't know why there's fuzz on there. Looks like a little rough. I'm probably going to have to do something to file that a little bit. But I want to make sure that this bearing is protected. So I have tried different things, different ways to plug, and silicone plugs, make yourself some and everything. And what I have found that works really good is a craft glue gun with low temp glue. So like on this, I am going to put a little bead of my glue around the edge and then let that dry for a second and then fill it in a little bit. Okay, here I'm going to fill up this little port here with the same, just a little bit of glue. And this is basically making a custom fitting plug, because once it's dry and after I'm done, I can come back in, with a little pick and pop it out. So it's really handy that way. So now you can see that's drying up a little bit, cooling, solidifying a bit. So I'm just going to come back and fill it in. I don't really want to fill in the entire bearing hole because, that could be a pain trying to clean out. But just layering it on there. And if there's some of the paint that is not going to be blasted off because it's covered with glue, that's okay. I can come back with, a little sanding pad, sanding paper or something, and get just that little bit of paint off. But it's everything around it that needs to be protected. So what else do we have here? These are not threaded. These are holes that screws pop through and they're threaded another place. So those are actually probably okay. These holes, let's see, these holes here, there is a plastic piece that pops in there that then the brushes go inside of. So I don't really need to worry about these too much because It's just a hole that's going to stay its same dimension. Basically, if I'm dealing with a bearing that there's going to be metal on metal up against, or a very carefully engineered threaded piece that's very fine, I need to make sure I protect those. See this part right here, that bracket, that's fine the way it is. I can just clean up around there. And like I said, the glass media that I use is very, very fine. It's extremely fine, so it's not going to damage those threads or anything like that. So that is my protection for that bearing. For this part, I'm going to tape over the spool pin. No, I don't take it off. I'm just going to tape over that spool pin, and then this piece will be done. I am going to mask around this and this. This is going to be stripped. And what I have found is that I can go ahead and blast it with the oil hole open. And my glass is so fine that when I pull it out, if I blow it out with air and just spin it a few times, any residual grit blows out. So that's okay. I'm going to leave it like that. All right. When I go to mask it, though, I want to cover up. When I'm going to mask to paint, I should say, I'm going to want to cover up this area and this area. But masking to paint is a totally different step than masking to strip, okay? I will be showing you, but I go through different steps. On this one, I'm just going to put my red tape over this hole and trim around it with a razor blade so it's exact. And this wheel is going to be painted entirely. You can see it does not have the shiny edge. But if you wanted to, and I have done in the past, once you strip it, you can sand it finely and bring a shine to this edge. You know, that's very, very possible if that's what you want. Let me get that part done, and then we'll start working on the machine itself. So, say I've got my tape on here. I'm just going to come back with my razor blade and trim around it like that. Okay, so I end up with a little masked hole like that. All right, so I'm going to do that to this side over here also. Okay, so now onto the machine, and lots to protect here. So all of this in here has to be totally off limits. There are little holes here, up in the front. Well, that one not so much because you can get to it from this side, but I am going to totally mask off this area. But these especially, there are, if you get sand and things in here, it's very difficult to deal with. And I need to make sure that this is closed off. This here is protected. And then there's the bottom. So everything that's movable down here, I'm going to be, taping off all of my gears, the shafts, anything that, like right in here, it's metal on metal, so that's all going to be isolated and everything. So give me a minute or two, or actually probably about 20, and I'm going to get her all set up. I wanted to show you when I'm packing before I tape off this top. I use grocery bags. I find they work fabulous for being able to get smushed into confined areas, So once I have that packed in, I can come back with my tape and put that over it. If at this point when I have, because in here there's some gears and a shaft, and my main thing with this area is that I don't want abrasive action to happen against the gears, okay? If by some chance some of the glass gets in there, the glass bead, sand, stuff, it's going to have so much packing around it, it's not going to be able to do anything abrasive. It's not going to be able to damage the shaft and things like that. It's just going to be able to be brushed off, blown out, things like that. What I want to make sure of is that I don't have sand going in there at the super high rate of speed. So this is going to stop any of that from happening. So if you can see, I am working on layering up my plugs here. Sometimes it takes a few. I need to do this over here. But that's what it looks like. So, I'm going to go ahead and finish this. I'll show you my cabinet and how it works really quickly. And then after that, the next step, you'll see the machine completely stripped of all paint. Okay, so just a quick look at my setup here. Down there, that's my electrolysis tank. I cannot use my electrolysis tank on aluminum machines. So, featherweights, 301s, all of those, I can't use it. So that's why I have to use this beast. So I got my massive air compressor, my blasting cabinet, and if you're curious, that is the grit that I use, okay? And I do, use my ear protection because it's very loud. So I'm not going to show you it working because it's crazy loud. The light inside here is not so great, so I just put a little DeWalt light on top, and that works. And I have to turn off all the lights in my shop when I'm going to use it so that it'll shine in there better. And then I do have a vacuum system over here to suck up the dust. It's connected to other stuff. But that's how I'm going to be stripping the paint off. Okay, so she is naked now, as you can see. You can see there's some shinier spots where once I pulled her out and I pulled her little plugs out and everything, I had to come back with like a wire wheel, a clean wire wheel, not one that has grease on it, and hit those spots, so that makes it a little shinier. And so at this point, what I need to do right now, well actually I'm going to take a break right now. I got a lot of hours in today on this machine, but I need to clean it up really well, get any residual dust and everything off of her. So I just, have a spray cleaner. This is actually a glass cleaner. I do have another cleaner that is specifically for grease, but this is a machine that I'm working with Jen at Sewing Machine Rehab on, and she does a really good job of getting all the grease out of the gears and everything before it comes to me. Not that there should be grease in the gears, but just saying sometimes they come to her a little bit greasy. So she gets them to me as clean as she can get them, and then I take the rest. But, wipe that down. I'm going to let this dry overnight. And then I'll put primer, self-etching primer on her tomorrow. But I need to go ahead and clean off all of the other little accessory parts also. So once I get that done with her today, I'm going to stick her into my booth. I've got a heater in there so she can be staying nice and warm, so that way she's at a great temperature for painting in the morning. And I just thought I would mention, I'm going to be masking her for painting in the morning too. I want this stuff to dry completely because, putting masking on top of something that's moist is not a good idea. It's not going to stick very well. So I'll be masking her and everything before I paint tomorrow, and you'll see that. Good morning. I cannot remember exactly where we left off, but I'll tell you where I am. After blasting, I cleaned her up very carefully and then masked her for painting. So this is the painting version of masking. So instead of, my glue and everything, it's just the little silicone plugs. And that way I can get a really tight fit around all the little holes, I have packing around the gears and tape over it. And I have primered already. I primered her yesterday with self-etching primer. And this is just a Tractor Supply one, but I have found that it works really great on these aluminum bodies. So there's that. It takes 72 hours for that self-etching primer to completely gas off, and I want to give it all the time it needs. But after 24 hours, I come back with my little 2000 grit sandpaper sponge and just really, really lightly sand everything. Just because the primer can leave a little bit of a texture, and I don't want that, okay? So I lightly sanded it and then put my little aerosol glass cleaner on a big towel and wiped everything down because I want to get all of the dust off. can see here, the little bearings are still protected, you know. Put that back on. So that wipes off all the dust and everything and leaves it smooth. So I need to give these parts 2 more days to completely gas off. You know, I'm always tempted to jump ahead and do it early, but you know, you live and learn, and I have learned to give this primer its full time period. So next time you see this, it's actually going to be colored. So it's all set up here, ready to paint. I'm going to be using pink enamel first, probably 2 coats of pink enamel, and then a coat of my pearl mist over that to give it a lovely pink pearl look. So for this piece, what I do is I paint the bottom first. These little pieces here are giving me trouble. Sorry about that. I'm just going to set them down. I paint the bottom first, and then once it is dry, then I can tip it up and paint the top. Okay? That way I can make sure that the top is going to stay really nice. And for this, I just kind of set it up on a lid, because then between rotating my turntable here and turning my little cup, I'm pretty able to get all of my angles. Once it is completely dry, again, I can coat the back, but this part is going to be hidden, so if that's not completely perfect, that's okay. It will be pearl pink though. So again, I'm just going to step away, give this a couple more days, and I will be back shortly. Hello and welcome to another day. I wanted to show you, I just got her color coats on. She is pink. She has 2 layers of pink enamel and a pearl layer on top of that. So she's looking really, really pretty. That is the machine. Over here I have her tray, motor housings, wheel, and such and so on. So I'm going to need to let these dry. Tomorrow I will come in, check them over, and then they're going to need to dry probably about 3 days before I begin to tackle the decals on her.